Pablo is a member of the Winter Crop Society, and he has led over 30 thesis papers, and he is one of the most renowned researchers at INTA. His work is quoted both nationally and internationally. He has received several awards for his contribution to improving wheat production, recently acknowledged by Balcarce as one of the 2023 protagonists because of the creation of the cultivar site. He has conducted trials in a field that I co-own with my brother. We have conducted simulations and replicated models from sub-Saharan Africa and extrapolate no-till from INTA Balcarce to sub-Saharan Africa. Is an old friend, so I'm pleased and honored to moderate the panel where he's present today. Adam was created from dust. He realized that he was going to be lonely, so he created Eve, and this was the start of mankind, according to the Bible. But since we come from the Balcarce unit, Ángel Berardo, an old technician from the unit, who thought that mankind was defective, said, well, I have to create something that is easy for Adam and Eve to eat. And he says that God created wheat so that we would have bread everywhere. And that is what I think the talk will be about today. Wheat can be grown in many places throughout the world. We are in debt with wheat, and I believe that we are in debt with people who have devoted their lives to this noble crop. So I will give him the floor for the presentation, and then we will entertain questions. Thanks very much, Nicolás. Thanks for the presentation. I want to clarify that with Nicolás, we have a long-lasting friendship. That is why I asked him to coordinate this. Secondly, the presentation I prepared with the help of Mohan Kohli. I don't know if you know him, but he is an expert, a wheat expert, and specifically he participated in the improvement program in Paraguay for the past 30 years. So it's a very important help. There's no way that I can see here what you see there, right? I want to start by underscoring the importance of wheat as a source of food. This is a list of the energy contribution, kilocalories per inhabitant per day of the different foodstuffs in Paraguay: corn, cassava, wheat, beef, soybean oil, sugar, milk, and the like. Wheat ranks third compared to Argentina, where wheat ranks first. Cassava is not included in Argentina. The other elements are the same. But wheat ranking amongst the top three foods contributing energy in Paraguay is important to underscore. This is the same, but for protein, we see that wheat also ranks third, with corn being second in Paraguay. In Argentina, the ranking is similar. Wheat ranks second, but both in Argentina and Paraguay and in the rest of Latin America, and I would say the world at large, wheat is still a major source of both energy and protein. So it is a strategic crop in terms of food security. What is wheat consumption in Paraguay? This is the consumption per inhabitant per year for most Latin American countries. The top three consumers are Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay. between 120 and 110 kilograms per inhabitant per year. Paraguay has 40 kilograms per inhabitant per year, and this is the representative of the global average, which is 50 kilograms. The largest consumers in the world and countries in part of Asia and north of Africa, Eastern Asia, with 200 kilograms of wheat per inhabitant per year. So Latin American consumption is low, but nonetheless, wheat is a very important part of our diet. To meet this demand, Paraguay needs to produce some 680,000 tons of wheat per year, whereas Argentina needs a larger volume, 5.8 million tons per year. That to show you the difference in magnitude. Nonetheless, it is a significant amount for a country that has a small area and little population. What is the evolution in terms of wheat consumption? Let me see if the clicker works. What we see in this chart is consumption per inhabitant per year. Even though consumption has become stable throughout the world, in the case of Argentina and Paraguay, there is an increase on the range of 2% per year, which is not to be ignored. I mean, this means that we have to increase production by that rate. Genetic improvement on average for the world has been 1% per year. So, and if we look at consumption in tons per year, we are speaking of an increase in consumption of 3.7% per year for Paraguay and 2.7% per year for Argentina. Once again, and well, what is the reason for this? Even though the consumption per inhabitant has become stable, the number of people increases, and so will consumption. And the same thing will happen throughout the world. Despite the criticism against wheat, wheat consumption is on the rise. We have discussed this importance of wheat as food, but it's also important to underscore its agricultural importance in Paraguay and in Latin America at large. It is the winter crop that can be more easily marketed. Thus, farmers may obtain income in dates that go against those of summer crops. Also, it provides a vegetable cover in winter, thus contributing to preventing soil erosion and disaggregation. It is a source of carbon. Wheat has a high proportion of carbon and nitrogen. It's stable carbon that will be or remain in the plot for a long time, and it contributes to weed control, reducing the use of agrochemicals and pesticides.
How has wheat crop developed in Paraguay? It was introduced by the Jesuits. You can see some ruins here, but there was no continuity there. There is a pioneer in wheat development in Paraguay, who is Moisés Bertoni. This person was born in Switzerland, and he studied natural science in Zurich. And when he was 26, he decided he wanted to live on agriculture, and he came to Argentina in 1884. He went to Misiones. The story explains why he got there, but he worked there. And 3 years later, he traveled to Paraguay, and he settled there. He carried out the first wheat assays in the region with different varieties. In 1884, Those are the first essays recorded in that area. Bertoni also wrote a book in 1903 with a special chapter on wheat production in Paraguay, where he describes the restrictions and limitations for wheat production in Paraguay. His clarity is really amazing. At the time in Argentina, at the same time in Argentina, there was a person called Carlos Girola who studied wheat production in Argentina. He wrote a book entitled Agricultural Research in Argentina, but he also worked in Entre Ríos, Corrientes, and Buenos Aires. In 1912, Guillermo Backhouse arrived in Argentina. He was a British who was hired by the Ministry of Agriculture, and he started doing genetic tests and assays in Argentina. Everything was wheat at the time. Then in 1919, Enrique Klein arrived in Argentina. He first went to Uruguay, and when Argentina hired Backhouse, a British person, Uruguay hired Enrique Klein, who eventually came to Argentina. And José Buch is another person who came to Argentina in 1923. And they are the pioneers in Argentina. And I'm mentioning them because at the time, people were already doing wheat breeding. And in many neighboring countries, there was an important exchange of cultivars based on what was achieved in Argentina. What are the observations made by Bertoni in Paraguay? Well, his conclusion was that wheat for pasta, bread, and crackers can be produced in Paraguay. He also said that planting had to take place end of March or April. The problem in Paraguay was climate. There were serious climate restrictions, that is, high temperatures in October and November. So seeding had to take place during the first month, and harvesting had to take place early too. He also realized, considering temperature, that there was no country in the world with the same isothermal lines they had in Paraguay. No other country has developed wheat under these temperatures. He compares Paraguayan wheat to Indian and Egyptian wheat. And he said, well, the latitude is similar, but the temperatures are lower. Here on the map, you can see Paraguay. And here we have India, Egypt, and Simit is another place where low latitude wheat is being produced. Any of those areas are cooler than Paraguay. Today, it is quite difficult to get climate information about India and El Cairo. He also mentioned diseases, but did not think they were a restricting factor. But Paraguay does have disease problems today. Rust and puricularia are two diseases we are familiar with rust, with stem rust, and pericularia is more endemic in the north. There is some pericularia in the south of Argentina, but it's much less frequent. But it may get here, and in that case, we'll have to ask the Paraguayans for help. Which are the main restricting factors in Paraguay? High temperature and diseases, drought, usually during the first part of the cycle, and excess rainfall that may affect the grain. And another problem we have is frost. You cannot delay wheat planting too much because harvesting competes with soybean. In other areas, you can work this out by delaying flowering time, but that will affect yield in this case. The situation is similar to what we see in the south of Buenos Aires. And this is due to the fact that in Paraguay they want to have 3 harvests on a row, and we will get up to 2. Regarding temperatures, which is one of the most important restricting factors in Paraguay, temperature is not so important in all stages. This is an assay carried out, well, it's 2 assays. For Pedro Echaniz Chavez Sanabria's dissertation, we compared the different wheat stages in Paraguay and Balcarce. You can see the different stages from emergence to the beginning of the critical period, second stage, which is critical period, and third stage, which is filling. And what you see here, and what called our attention initially, was the main temperature difference is seen in the first stage. And why is that? Because if we are on the same date, we agree that it's hotter in Paraguay, but if you try to find the optimum time for flowering date happens at an earlier stage in Paraguay than in Argentina. So the major difference in winter leads to these shorter cycles, and you need an increased density so that yield will not be affected. And with diseases, you may lose part of that leaf area, so you need to have an increased plant density. Bertoni also mentioned some ideas about how to manage wheat in Paraguay, and I'm following his line because his suggestions are quite modern, trying to reduce temperature and altitude plots. There are some countries such as Mexico, Venezuela, and Colombia that produce wheat, even India. India produces wheat in higher areas. Try to plant in the south of the country. Actually, most of the wheat in Paraguay is planted between the Paraguay and Paraná rivers, which is the southeast of the country. Finding an economic solution. What does he mean? Well, he refers to the conflict between wheat harvesting and soybean planting. At the time, he already saw that that might be a restricting factor. He also mentioned that wheat was important to achieve continuous soil cover with living plants. I think 3 Congresses ago, the motto was evergreen. Well, he said this in 1903. And he also mentioned something very important, which is it is good to experiment several years before going to larger scale plots, which is an obvious truth that is still valid today. We also mentioned the problem of temperature. It can be seen more clearly here. We can see the isothermal lines here in the south. Temperature is around 20 degrees C, and in the north it goes up to 24. Temperature goes up from north to west and from south to north, from east to west and from south to north. You can see rainfall there, 600 millimeters a year, and the north it's half that volume. Well, it's the west rather than the north. There's increased rainfall in the southeast. And these are the factors that determine wheat yield. Here we see how the planted surface area is distributed. This is a high-resolution map, 10 by 10 kilometers, that is 10,000 hectares. This is done by an English group, and it's updated every 5 years. Here we have 500 hectares of wheat every 10,000 hectares. Most of the wheat is planted in this area. And if you look at what happens in Argentina, there's almost no wheat. This is a better place in Paraguay, but it's not completely attractive for Argentina. And if you take a look at the yields, you can see that they're similar to temperature and rainfall. In the south and in the east, things are better. In Paraguay, there are 18 districts, and 10 out of the 18 districts say that they plant wheat. But if you do your survey, you'll see that there are 3 districts that account for 80% of the planted surface area. And again, this is in the south and in the east of Paraguay. We already know this is the reality. This is a study about climate change in Paraguay, and it's been found in terms of temperature. Well, this is average temperature for the whole country. The different meteorological stations were averaged since 1955 until 2018, 2019, and you can clearly see that there is a temperature increase. 2 cents of a degree a year, from 22 to 23.5. I'm not sure whether this has been correctly established, but if you consider the temperature in the big cities, you will see that temperature in Villartúzar is much higher than the temperature taken in Ezeiza, for example. Well, but it's a growing trend. In terms of rainfall are quite stable. There's more rainfall during La Niña events, but in general terms, it's quite stable. So even though temperature is critical, at least it looks that things are looking more complicated as time goes by. We can see the expansion of agriculture in Argentina and in Paraguay. These are Google Earth images that show this area in terms of plots in the year 2000. And in 2022, you can see that there's a much larger number of plots, There is a clear expansion in an area that's less favorable, not so good for wheat, because temperatures are very high, even for soybean. Here we see the planted surface area and the main crops, as well as the evolution since 1997. Wheat is blue. You can see that there was a growth until 2010, and then you see a plateau. The big agricultural growth has to do with soybean. Same happened in Argentina. And then you can see sunflower and corn. Sunflower has almost disappeared. The problem here is that there's a large surface with no cover crop in winter. So from the point of view of good soil management, wheat crops should be encouraged. The same happens in Argentina. Now, what can we say about production? Well, this is the production and yield in 1960. Red is export excess. Paraguay had a very quiet and slow stage until 1980. There was a deficit, and the country had to import wheat. Remember, I told you there was quite a large wheat consumption in Paraguay, so they had to import. From 1980 to year 2000, there was a significant increase, around 16,000 tons a year. But from 2000 to 2010, there was major increase, which was larger than the increase we had in Argentina. And this was due to expansion of the service and increased yield. This increased production made it possible for Paraguay to start exporting in 1986, but those exports did not remain stable, and in 2001, Paraguay started with continuous self-supply. Today, or at least considering the last 3 seasons, Paraguay is producing 1 million tons a year. They plant 445,000. They harvest 445,000 hectares. The average yield is 2.4 tons per hectare, and the exportable balance is around 300,000 tons a year, with a protein level that is better than the one we see in Argentina. There was a record here, 1.4 million tons, but I don't think this can be replicated, because you can see that this high export goes hand in hand with a smaller export the year before. This may have been due to some goods being withheld. I'm not sure why, but I think this is what happened. So you may have 300, even 500,000 tons a year for exports. Production is surface area times yield. And if you take a look at that ratio, you see it's a good ratio. A large part of that increase is due to an increased surface area, but you can also see there is increased yield. And some data show that this is associated to the progress of breeding. This slide allows us to compare the situation in Paraguay and some other areas in Argentina. And you can see that if you compare yield from Argentina and Paraguay since 1970, 50 years of yield, thank you. You see that even though yield in Argentina was better than Paraguay, the growth kept almost the same rate. Actually, both countries increased yield was 2.5 a year. And remember that this is what is to be expected as a result of technology and breeding. Now, if we consider the last 50 years in Argentina and Paraguay, the last 20 years, the increase in yield was smaller. Now, if you compare Paraguay to the north of Argentina, Paraguay achieved better yields. Here, we see the different areas that were compared. Santa Fe, I consider the north of Argentina, but the other provinces, I consider them all not only part of the province. This is the Argentinian average, and this is the Paraguayan average. And you see that there are some Argentinian provinces that are above Paraguay. In Corrientes, there is a company that is focusing on optimizing crops. They're doing that together with rice. So when they have hydric efficiency, they do irrigation, and that is 3,000 to 5,000 hectares. And this accounts for that large increase in yield. In the north of Santa Fe, there is a district with the largest yield increase, which is 9 de Julio. There's a water table there. I guess it's going down, but that played a major role, at least in the period I considered. Then Santiago del Estero, I think that's a real yield increase in the north of Argentina. And in the case of the other provinces and districts, we're seeing negative growth. That's bad news for Argentina because it's an important production area, over 10% of the Argentinian surface area. And this means that the north of Argentina cannot reach self-supply, when actually this might be possible. And I think Paraguay is a good example of the fact that this can be achieved. Here, for Pedro's dissertation, we compared Argentina and Paraguayan cultivars. Here, we see the Paraguayan crops and the Argentinian crops are on your right. And in blue, you see yields for Balcarce, and in red, yields for Paraguay. When we did this, we assumed that Paraguayan cultivars would have better yield in Paraguay, and the Argentinian cultivars would give us better yields in Argentina. We exchanged cultivars, and we realized that that was not the case. Argentinian cultivars in Paraguay performed very well, just like Paraguayan cultivars in Argentina. So potential yield was not lost. But we have to take into account that these Argentinian cultivars are short-cycle cultivars, because we need cultivars that could be planted in Paraguay reasonably well, and in this case, there are fungicide, 2 or 3 fungicide applications, 3 in Paraguay and 2 in Argentina, because many of these Argentinian cultivars would be susceptible to diseases, to Paraguayan diseases, and irrigation was also applied. But besides those factors, you can see that Paraguayan cultivars behaved very well in Argentina. In 2018, we carried out a specific assessment of Paraguayan cultivars in Argentina, and at least in the north of Argentina, they did quite well. Well, let's review wheat breeding in Paraguay. You will see that it's quite different from what happened in Argentina, where the first essay started in 1884. Bertoni started them. Until 1966, there was almost no crosses or breeding in Paraguay. Remember, I mentioned that Argentina and Uruguay were the most advanced countries in terms of wheat breeding, wheat seed breeding. In 1966, the National Wheat Program was established. That's when the first breeding started. At the time, Argentina had already signed an agreement with CIMIT that involved seed breeding, fertilization management, and assessment of Argentine cultivar diseases and health. Between 1972 and 78, the Ministry of Agriculture and Cattle Breeding introduced semi-short cultivars, and the first local breeding programs were started. In 1978, the first formal agreement with CIMIT started, and shorter cycle cultivars were selected. There was a better disease behavior, and chemical control of diseases started. As a result of that, in the 80s, Paraguay had the first production expansion. I'll be finished in 3 minutes' time. In 1993, the agreement with CIMIT was interrupted, and productive activities became stagnated. Between 2003 and 2024, during these 21 years, there was a public-private agreement process. In Argentina, public-private activities started many years before. These are the participants. But we first had the Ministry of Agriculture and Cattle Breeding, CAPECO, which is the Paraguayan Association of Grains and Oilseed Farmers, and CIMIT. In 2010, IPTA was created, which is the Paraguayan Institute for Agricultural Technology, that replaces the ministry activities, and CAPECO and CIMIT has been replaced by INBio, which is the Agricultural Technology Institute, which is an NGO that is still doing breeding activities. These years, over these 21 years, 20 cultivars were released, and those are the ones that made it possible to achieve that major yield increase. As a summary of those times, we can see that between 1966, when the National Wheat Program started, until today, the yield increase is a 60-fold yield increase, which is quite above what happened in the north of Argentina and in several countries in the region. What's happening now? These organizations, IPTA, CAPECO, and INBio, have their separate programs. IPTA has an got an IDB loan, and through this loan, they have been able to buy equipment, tools, training, postgraduate professionals, and they have also hired consultants, and I am one of them. I'd just like to remind you at the beginning of the year 2000, Argentina had a similar program, and most of the harvesters and seeders were bought as a result of that. And all these programs will now be managed separately. There might be some agreements, but they all have similar objectives: improving varieties, disease resistance, exploring tolerance to agrobiotic stress. Just one more minute. What can we expect? Currently, Paraguay has 3.6 million soybean hectares a year. Wheat may account for 30% of that surface, so wheat would surface with 1.1 million hectares a year. Expected wheat yield is 2,400 kilos, but we might expect this figure to go up to 2,800. And expected production may be expected to reach 3.1 million tons a year, and this entails projection value of $620 million a year, which would be an important encouragement for Paraguay, and this is why Paraguay is focusing on improving wheat production. This is Mohan Kohli and myself when my hair was blacker. Thank you.
Bueno.
Thanks, Pablo, as usual. A very detailed presentation. We have some time for questions and answers from the audience. And if you don't have questions, I do have ill-intended questions for Pablo. If you raise your hands, I will hand in the mic. Otherwise, I will start. And we'll go from the general to the specific. At the beginning, you said that globally, there is an increase in wheat consumption. Despite criticism, we all eat bread, and we are wheat fans. This is yet another foodstuff that is being under discussion. People like discussing, consumers, customers engage in discussions about foodstuffs, and each consumer emphasize environmental aspects, other nutritional aspects, whether it's a functional food or not, whether it ages or not. And given the years of experience with wheat, how easy or adaptable is wheat to that specific demand we face today? Is it a kind of foodstuff that can be made functional and adapted to a niche market? I was waiting for a flight with Borlock for a full day because there was a delay, and he said this discussion is entertained by people who have no food scarcity issues. This is the cheapest foodstuff, but it's not a type of food for poor people. With wheat flour, you can cook anything from very cheap dishes to very refined dishes. I agree that there's interest in improving the type of food we eat. We want to extend our lifespan, but the criticism is groundless. We should engage in a discussion about that, but I don't find sound criticism or founded criticism. Data are confusing. And at the end of the day, what prevails is what people can spend. That's what's happening and what data show. It is still a significant part of the diet. Consumption is on the rise. It is not decreasing. I will move on to the second question because I see no hands up. But if you have any question, please let me know. In line with what you were saying, something that I learned from Pablo and which has always struck me is that we understand wheat as a major source of carbohydrates. It's the source of carbohydrates, but in this age where nutritionists recommend, especially people like me, to focus on protein, the main source of protein is also wheat. That's something striking. Well, indeed, the wheat protein is not poor quality, it's balanced. There are two amino acids missing, tryptophan, and I don't remember the other one. It's not that they are missing, they are in a smaller concentration, but fermented wheat products level this up. When you eat bread, you have a good composition in terms of essential amino acids. Vegans, for example, substitute protein with wheat gluten, and they survive, the majority of them at least. A question from the audience. There is the Fondagro Executive Secretary. Thanks, Dr. Abbate. I have a question. Where do you find potential for developing wheat, but with different properties, in line with what engineer Nicolás had said about, say, for example, we work using biofortification, things that come from, say, different crops. Might wheat be genetically improved so that it may stand out? In your experience, there have been attempts in terms of improvement, genetic improvement. There has been some work done. There is organic wheat, which has started to be grown. We might sell wheat, especially with certain properties, say with a low gluten content or with a specific protein content. By classifying what you have produced, this might be done. I mean, if you think of what bears the greatest impact, that's the one that will be non-harmful for celiacs. Through transgene wheat, we might reach those markets. As to fortification, it's important. Several countries, including Argentina, have a fortification standard, which it's iron enriched wheat, and this contributes to neural development. Chile has studied the issue of spina bifida, and by enriching wheat, the problem has been reduced. Gene enrichment has not proven too efficient. It's far more efficient to enrich wheat during processing rather than on the field. At the end of the day, it's difficult, but you must always give it a try. You must not stop trying. Pablo, in trying, in this that you were saying, the talk is clearly especially interesting for the Paraguayan audience now that you are a Paraguayan consultant. Greetings to Dr. Edgar Esteche, President of IPTA, who is surely going to watch this video. We are sorry that he was not present here today. What are 2 or 3 lessons that you have learned and that we Argentinians may obtain, especially from farmers in the northern region of Argentina? Well, Paraguay has set the example of what might be done in the north of Argentina. We are looking at what Paraguay has done, not only in terms of gene improvement, but of management as well. They are more advanced than our provinces. Here we may complain about the tax withholdings, but the situation in Paraguay is not any better. So I don't see there is any valid excuse for Argentina not to do so. And having an area that doesn't grow wheat means bringing wheat meal from the center of the country with the ensuing increase in costs. The wheat grown in the Pampa region should be exported because ports are nearby, and then wheat should be grown in the north, and this will bring down costs. Pablo, don't you think that one of the incentives for growing wheat in the north of Argentina will be promoting the use of wheat for fodder, as it is the case in other countries? Yes, it might be used. Indeed, this might be an alternative use. You grow it. If it's okay, you use it for wheat, otherwise for grain, otherwise for fodder. But how many trials are required? Not so many. It's not so difficult to implement. This is what we are missing. Also, we lack harvesters to conduct the trials. For example, in the province of Corrientes, there is no harvester for conducting a wheat trial or a wheat network. Infrastructure is what we need and what we lack. But, well, we have to work on it. Well, congratulations, Pablo, and congratulations to the moderator as well. I have a question. I don't think you showed rainfall distribution. I think it's quite even throughout the year. So my question is, how should we work on the different yield components in wheat for Paraguay? Should we aim our a larger number of leads, a smaller number? Because even though, the number is variable, and sometimes frost is important, there are also significant droughts. So that is what I wanted to ask you about the physiology. My approach is the following. A problem that we do face, and which I will try to move forward through my consultancy, is that wheat has little foliar development. The trials conducted with wheat under irrigation showed little leaf development. We have to see what happens if we increase the leaf area, what happens with tassel size, and whether we do not have a disease, we are not generating a disease petri dish. Yet another problem in Paraguay has to do with frost, because they perform early harvest. The risk of frost used in Paraguay is higher than that for Argentina. When you estimate the probability, in Paraguay it's above 20%. In Argentina, we are on the range of 10–15%. So far, we have tried to manage these by solving this for wheat alone. We should take on a more comprehensive approach and find a solution for soybean as well. If we were to delay soybean harvest for a week and changing the harvest date for wheat, I think that would be better than just relying on correcting the wheat cultivar alone. As for the rest, the number of tassels, well, to me the problem is the leaf area. Well, we have to empty the room, undoubtedly, and I have told Pablo already, and I want to say now this publicly, I commend him for having become a wheat consultant in Paraguay, because this will bear an impact in wheat growing in the north of Argentina, the south of Brazil. He has experience after having grown wheat in the province of Buenos Aires, and we know how impactful his work has been on productivity in our plots. People want to ask more questions, but unfortunately, I have to close the session. And one last question. Pablo, to me, is an INTA shaman. This may be his last talk as INTA agent because he's retiring. I'm certain I will keep on moderating his talks when he's no longer an INTA official, because we love having him and sharing the stage with him. But thinking that this is your last talk as an INTA officer and that I now chair INTA, can you leave us with 3–4 bullet points of your life devoted to studying wheat? And what would you like to leave as your legacy to INTA, knowing that we will continue working together along the same lines. But supposing this will be your last talk, what would you like to leave as your legacy after 40 years having worked with wheat at INTA, the Agricultural Technology Institute? Well, I delivered a talk in March. It was the last one. Well, I have submitted all the paperwork for my retirement in February, but I haven't retired yet. I thought my last talk would be in March. Probably this one will be the last one. So first of all, I would like to thank you for your presence. I would like, as a take-home message, I would like to thank you all. It was thanks to society that has paid for my wages that I was able to devote 40 years to research into wheat as a crop. I will keep on researching, writing, but after 200 publications, over 30 thesis papers, I'm amongst the most read researchers in INTA. I had the pleasure of reading Moisés Bertoni's calendar over the weekend. I mean, I had more spare time, so this is what I would like to do now that I'm going to retire.